Instead of cleaning the forest floors and removing dead trees, capturing rain runoff, making sure California has water in fire hydrants, Democrat politicians will instead deflect responsibility and blame climate change. This magical blame shifting allows them to avoid accountability for their incompetence and mismanagement while wielding tyrannical power over voters, harassing them for cooking on gas stoves, forcing them to drive electric vehicles, and charging them a carbon tax for simply living. Human lives are not improved by this. They are destroyed. Cities lie in actual rubble. And taxpayers and insurance policyholders around the country are on the hook to clean up their failed, far-left, dystopian disaster. And I'm not joking. There needs to be criminal investigations into this. Gavin Newsom closed 4 dams. Karen Bass is in Ghana, or she was, and she came back. Do we have Karen Bass just completely freezing up? What cut is that? They ask her this question. She can't even answer it. She's the mayor of Los Angeles. If there was any fair and free election, Caruso would be the mayor of Los Angeles. Again, there were warnings and warnings and warnings about this. And guess what? Somebody get your hat. Trump was right about everything. President Trump went on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he was so mocked by this. Listen carefully. He was so attacked and mocked for this. Play cut 106.
They said, we have no water. I said, do you have a drought? No, we don't have a drought. I said, why do you have no water? Because the water isn't allowed to flow down. It's got a natural flow from Canada all the way up north of water, more water than they could ever use. And in order to protect a tiny little fish, the water up north gets routed into the Pacific Ocean. Millions and millions of gallons of water gets poured. I could have water for all of that land, water for your forests. You know, your forests are dry as a bone.
Yeah.
Okay?
Dangerous.
That water could be routed. You know, you could have everything. Oh, not only dangerous, billions of dollars a year they spend on forest fires. And, you know, there's a case with the environment. They're not allowed to rake their forests because you're not allowed to touch it. And all they have to do is clean their forest, meaning rake it up, get rid of the leaves, get rid of, leaves that are sitting there for 5 years. And
we'll certainly get rid of the dead fall.
And get rid of the trees that have fallen that are like.
You can't clean up the trees or the brush. Everybody in LA knows it, but because you might upset the natural habitat of the grasshoppers. Donald Trump is running on America first and Americans first. The Democrats run on Delta smelt first and grasshoppers first. It is tempting to want to implement diversity, equity, inclusion. Oh, we must be very equitable. However, when there's just a little stress test, things start to fall apart. In 10 days and 23 hours, President Trump becomes president. Just imagine how unfit our military is right now. And we've been warning about that for quite some time. This feckless response that we are seeing on the ground in the Palisades and all across California is a microcosm of a larger cancer and a tumor that President Trump is going to have to take a scalpel and remove. Environmentalists have weaponized the Endangered Species Act. They basically invent subspecies that are actually part of a much more common one so they can justify blocking development. Environmentalists are earth worshipers. They're inherently anti-progress, anti-growth. They're inherently against human flourishing. To them, this fire is just karma for all of modernity's development against them. Just the other day, the New York Times admitted that the snail darter wasn't even a real species, and it blocked development for years. The New York Times wrote, this tiny fish mistaken identity halted a dam's construction. Scientists say the snail darter, whose endangered species status delayed the building of a dam in Tennessee, is a genetic match of a different fish. So they just invent subspecies to prevent development. I want to hear from you, freedom@charliekirk.com. There needs to start to be investigations of public officials. By the way, let's just get the record straight. If Eric Adams, the mayor of New York, is under multiple federal indictments for taking free flights on Turkish Airlines, it's not too much to say that Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, should face federal charges for letting her city burn. They tried to put Donald Trump in prison for paying some business expense. I think Karen Bass can face federal charges.